So on the off chance that you're new to my channel or you just haven't already heard, I recently got my first tattoo in Korea. Not like my first tattoo, but like my first tattoo in Korea, and the experience was actually a lot different than it is in the States. A few of my friends and a few other people based off of my last video about it were interested in hearing about the full experience as well as tips that I might have for anybody who is planning on getting a tattoo in Korea.
In your fight I show you bite, on your flight I show you sight. What it takes is mistakes, on my plate I give you light. On my beach, on my trees, dumping something.
So first of all, I guess I'll just start with what I got. On, again, the off chance that you haven't already heard me talking about it, which is slim because I don't shut up about it. It's this little 1004, which is the smallest tattoo that I have, and I got it handwritten by Daeyeon from BAP because I used to be obsessed with BAP and I met him recently and it just felt right.
이게 내 한계인데.
So this is what I got done. Pretty much exactly this size, a little bit smaller, but I really wanted it to almost perfectly mimic this. But I've also inquired about larger tattoos around Seoul, so I'm gonna try to make this video informative for any type of tattoo that you're trying to get. I feel like the first question that a lot of people are gonna have is about pricing. So I was a little bit misled about the normal range whenever it comes to getting a tattoo in Korea because I kept looking at people who were incredibly famous on Instagram, which I feel like is gonna be a very common thing to do. If you're a foreigner, or you just like don't know Korea that well or Korean that well, odds are you're probably going to come across people who are like globally renowned on Instagram. And because of that, they were charging, you know, globally renowned prices. Like it's gonna be the same anywhere you go. If somebody has a massive following on Instagram, their prices are going to differ from like the average, of course. I remember I contacted a few tattoo artists and looked around a few places and was under the impression that, oh, maybe like tattoos in Korea are just like very expensive, especially for the size, because a lot of Koreans really like that like smaller minimal sized thing. That's kind of what I was looking at getting. I got prices as high as like $500 for very small tattoos. I've seen people pay $700 for very small tattoos done by really good and talented artists. So I'm not saying that they're of course not worth that money, because they are, but at the same time, I just sort of started to think that that was the norm in Korea when it very much is not. The more that I started talking to like my actual Korean friends, like, is tattooing just like expensive here? Or how much did you pay for your pieces? Blah, blah, blah. I actually quickly realized that I would say that it's cheaper here, especially right now considering the conversion rate, but just in general, shop minimums in the States, pretty much every place I've gone has been closer to around $80, whereas here, minimums are closer to 50. Like I said, that's like 50,000 won, so right now with the conversion rate, hello. It's very cheap. So that's what I actually paid for my tattoo because it's so small, just in case you were curious. But because tattoo shops don't really operate the exact same way here as they do in the States, I don't think that they really use the exact wording of a shop minimum. I think they tend to just quote you based off of the size that you have. But generally, really small pieces, not done by people who are completely Instagram famous, tend to be around 50, 60 bucks. And that does include free touch-ups, at least it did for mine. And I'm assuming that just like in the States, tattooists do feel the desire to offer that for you. Additionally, even if a smaller design does cost more than what I paid or what I've seen, there is no tipping culture in Korea, so that makes it even more cost efficient. So with the 50,000 won, I got the tattoo, I'm getting a free touch-up, and there's no tip included. The way that I found my artist and what I would recommend people to do to find local artists outside of whoever's just very popular on Instagram is to just do a search on Instagram, including the location of where you want to get it done. So I was just like Hongdae tattoo or whatever, just like searching. I would look at like hashtags, I would look at people who had it in their description or whatever, and at times I would even just search tattoo in Korean and just scroll through whoever came out, and if somebody matched the vibe, I would just check where they were located. But it can be tricky at times because there's not going to be a whole lot of information on their Instagram page as far as precise location. They will at least usually have like Hongdae area or Itaewon or Seongsu or wherever, but precise addresses are almost never readily available on Instagram. There's not a lot of information at all. You usually have to DM them first or Kakao them to find out more. I would recommend using Kakao because if you were to DM an artist on Instagram, you kind of have to enter into a conversation with them right away. But most of them have open Kakao talks, which means that as soon as you like open the link, they have a drop-down list of information that's kind of like need to know, FAQs before you even start the chat with them. So on the off chance that you've somehow been surviving in Korea without Kakao, I would just go ahead and recommend recommend downloading it because it made that whole experience so much easier, and I was able to view information about artists without having to directly speak with them. But even after doing that a few times with a few different artists, I quickly realized that it's a lot more secretive than I thought it was. So not only do tattooists not have their locations listed on Instagram, they also won't give it to you through Kakao until literally the day of the appointment. So it's like undisclosed locations, very, very secretive, and that's all because tattooing is technically illegal in Korea. The law says that only doctors, like medical professionals, are able to give tattoos, which is really unfortunate, but that does make most tattooing illegal. And that whole aspect of it did make me feel a bit uneasy, I'm not gonna lie, especially if I had decided to go by myself. Like on the day of the appointment, they sent us over the location. We went. Luckily I brought Chris, but it was all still very creepy. It was in this like unmarked building. We had to go down the steps because it was in the basement level. The steps weren't lit at all, and then as soon as we arrived at the door, this like green light kicked in. It was like something out of a movie. I honestly thought for a second that I might get kidnapped. The door opened by itself because they had been watching us through the CCTV. I didn't knock or anything. I just arrived and they opened the door. It's all very, very secretive, honestly. And luckily it was completely fine. The tattoo shop was an entire vibe, like basement vibe, lit kind of like this, honestly even cooler. I think they really played into the whole basement thing, basement aesthetic very well, like secret aesthetic, which is sad because they're not choosing to do that. It's kind of out of necessity, and it does make the client feel, like I said, a little bit wary, a little bit sketchy. My tattoo artist ended up being very, very nice, but because of all of that, I would definitely recommend bringing someone. Not that it's a common thing or anything, but just the fact that you have someone telling you to come to this undisclosed location on the day of to get a service, when a lot of the times tattooists don't even show their faces on their pages, again because of the legality of everything. So it can all feel very kind of sketchy, and just to be safe, I would recommend bringing someone. There was actually another tattoo artist that I was considering and looking at their Kakao info, and it actually said straight up like only the person getting tattooed can come. And again, I'm sure that that's for a reason, but that didn't make me feel very comfortable. So that's why I actually ended up going with the place that I did, because we asked the tattoo artist if it was okay for Chris to come with me, and he said that that was totally fine. So personally, just for peace of mind, I would bring somebody. Just also obviously ask and just be understanding that there is a reason why people have to take precautions. They're literally putting their jobs and lives at risk. Tattooists in Korea are literally fined and jailed over doing their job, and it's just insane because they're well recognized. So many Koreans have tattoos. There's even a job code for tattooists, but the law is just so outdated that it's holding them back from literally their livelihood. And recently there was actually a politician who kind of campaigns for tattooists' rights to legalize tattooing in Korea, who got the job code tattooed on her arm by a very famous tattooer, Doi, who I follow and who's like another big activist for tattooers. I thought that that was really cool. I think they're gonna have a ruling on it sometime next month, this month now at this point. So I'm really hoping things can change, but in the meantime, just be as careful and as understanding as you can. But moving on to the tattoo, even though it was really small, which I feel like would be easily overlooked or shrugged off in the States, if you know what I mean. A lot of artists just don't really take small tattoos that seriously. But because small tattoos are so popular in Korea, a lot of artists, including mine, specialize in them. They take it very seriously. He made sure that I had the right size. He made like a few different renditions of the size. He took his time on it. Just the tattoo alone took like 30 minutes, whereas I feel like this would be banged out in like 5 minutes in the States. He was very particular in making sure that it looked like a pin stroke, because that's what I asked for. I wanted everything to be as similar as possible, and he did a great job with that. I know it's only been a couple of months, but it still looks great. The only gaps that are in it are because, again, he was trying to mimic the whole pin stroke thing that's been there the entire time, which I was worried about because, just another side note, another tip, I guess. Very thin tattoos like this tend to have problems. They tend to fade, which I feel like is a big issue that I have with sort of the tattoos that are more popular here, especially if it's imagery and you're doing like a lot of like thin shading and stuff of that nature, a lot of single needle things. Just know that a lot of those won't last that long. long. And everything's obviously up to you, and I decided to go ahead and get this, but I made sure that it wasn't like so super thin, and I think that it was done really well to the point that it'll probably last me a long time. To pay, we actually did a direct deposit, which is really popular in Korea, where they just give you their bank number and you just directly send them the money via wire. You have to have a Korean account to do that, I believe, so I'm sure that most places would accept cash. Many places are not going to take cards, so just keep that in mind. Not everything's gonna be like this. Bigger tattoo studios are gonna be like less secretive, they advertise more, they might accept cards or whatever, but because they're popular and they're putting themselves out there more, they're also taking a bigger risk, which also seems to mean that they're gonna be more expensive as well. So just keep all of that in mind. I feel like my tattoo experience was a very common one, day-to-day, like neighborhood tattoo artist, which I feel like is useful information, so that's why I'm sharing what I experienced. And again, there's not really a tip culture, but I read a few blogs that said that people often bring gifts. I know that there is a huge gift culture in Korea. There were like forum people asking like, oh, you know, since there's no tips or whatever, should I bring gifts? And people were like, yeah, definitely, like bring gifts to your tattoo artist. Chris and I had the same struggle with our hairstylist and decided that we're gonna start bringing them gifts instead of tips, because you do wanna show your appreciation, and it's not that gifts are necessarily a requirement, especially if it's just with the artist that you're going to for the first time, but just know that that is definitely going to be more accepted than a tip if you did want to offer something. But anyway, if I missed anything or if you have any questions, I just thought of something else that I forgot to mention. Oh, another thing is every single tattoo, no matter how small, is appointment only. And that goes for most tattoo shops. There are a few that do walk-ins. We called Seoul Ink, I believe one time. They said that they do walk-ins, but that's like one of the biggest, most recognized tattoo shops in Seoul. So I reckon that's probably why. Everywhere else is gonna be by appointment only. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this. If you have any other questions, if I missed anything, there's anything that you're curious about, don't hesitate to ask me. If you don't necessarily want to leave it in the comments, you can always DM me on Instagram, and I'm happy to help however I can. And yeah, I'm just overall very, very happy with this little guy, and I'm hoping that I can get something bigger done here soon now that I know how it kind of goes, and now that I've found some more local artists that aren't gonna break my bank. Anyway, yeah, I'll talk to you later.